Let's talk about how to increase student engagement and improve classroom management with a variety of questioning strategies. Most of the time, when we think of our education and when we think about how we ask questions, there's something that I refer to as teacher default mode. And this is when a teacher asks a question to the whole class, and any student that wants can raise their hand, and the teacher calls on them one by one, allowing a variety of voices to be heard. There are a few disadvantages to this questioning strategy. One is that students can completely tune out if they decide not to raise their hand. The same students might always raise their hand, and it can also provide a little bit of disengagement from students as they have to listen to each person that decides to answer the question. So if we do this same questioning strategy over and over again, student engagement can go down and the same students can continuously check out of our content in our class. So what can we do instead of whole group questioning? We can make sure that we're using a variety of questioning strategies. We can also take our questions through a filter of, should this be a question that I ask? Sometimes teachers just simply ask too many questions. The other thing to think about as you try to use questioning strategies is, do my students know the routines and expectations for this questioning strategy? The reason we use that teacher default mode of whole group question and answer is because students know and understand how that works. So please keep in mind that as you try to use different questioning strategies in your classroom, it's important to go over what the expectations are for those questioning strategies. A great goal would be to use 5 to 6 strategies across a given class period. Also, we would have the goal of every time we ask a question, we would want most students to be engaged in answering the question in some way. So here we go. Here are the 20 questioning strategies. The first one is a turn and talk. The teacher poses a question, students turn and talk with a partner seated right next to them, and they respond to the question. This works great if you have students paired with a turn and talk partner where they automatically know who their turn and talk partner is. If you're in some sort of a reading unit, it works great to have students seated next to somebody who is reading the same small group book as them so they have that common ground when they turn and talk. There are many different variations of the turn and talk. So the first one is simply just having students turn and talk and then moving on. Another variation would be to have students turn and talk with each other and then bring it back to a whole class share where you do ask one or two people to respond. The great part about this is all students have already had their voices heard and may feel more comfortable sharing because they've already shared with their partner. Another variation of the turn and talk is to give that individual think time and have all students be thinking independently to come up with their answer and then moving into a turn and talk. Another variation of the turn and talk would just be to flip what we talked about in number 2. And this time you would start with the whole class share, have 2 to 3 students share out to start generating some ideas, and then go into the turn and talk. So what's great about the turn and talk is all students' voices are heard. Everybody talks, everybody is able to listen to somebody else's perspective. Another questioning strategy is called students ask the question. This is where the teacher pauses at a key spot during the lesson and asks the students to think of a question that would be good to ask at this point in the lesson. So an example would be, you're reading The Hunger Games, Katniss is stuck in a tree, and the career tributes are waiting below for her. She gets the idea from Rue to cut down the tracker jacker nest. You might pause and say to students, what question would you ask right now to discuss this part of the book? Another questioning strategy is teacher modeled thinking. This is where the teacher asks the question and then they actually respond to their own question by going through the thought process that they would go through to answer the question. Students can learn a lot from seeing thinking in action being broken down and explained part by part and not just getting the answer. Symphony share is when the teacher asks a question that requires a one-word response to no more than a sentence response. Students stand in a circle around the classroom and they whip around the circle, sharing their response. This works great with some kind of talking piece where students are handing that talking piece to each other so they know when it is their turn to talk. Thumbs up, thumbs down is when the teacher asks a question that requires a yes or no response, and students simply give a thumbs up, thumbs down, and if they would answer yes, obviously thumbs up, a thumbs down. If it's a no, this strategy can work with like concrete answers, but it can also work with opinion-based questions. Another strategy is raise your hand if. This would be great for even a weekend share out. This could be used with any sort of content as well as a check-in. The example I give here is, you're at the beginning of a writing unit and students are deciding on their topic. And like in this case with the memoir vignette, students are picking between person, place, emotion, or activity / hobby as their common thread. So you could just say, raise your hand if, to get a sense of what is the common thing that most students are using, or is there a variety? The next questioning strategy is scale of 1 to 5. This is when you would ask students to respond by holding up 1 to 5 fingers, and this would just be a self-reflection or a self-assessment. This works great with behavior. Say you just had independent reading time and you're asking students to think about, how well did you follow those expectations of having your book, keeping your mind focused on your reading, creating a strong reading environment for the other students in your classroom. On a scale of 1 to 5, how well did you follow those expectations? The 1, 2, 3, 4 questioning strategy is in place of A, B, C, D. So you would have a multiple choice question displayed for students with the answers that are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and students simply hold up what they think is the correct answer. A sticky note jot, when the categorize, would be you're asking students a question, they're responding on a sticky note, and then you may have different areas in the classroom where you have students stick their sticky note depending on how their response was. The next one, the sticky note jot with teacher feedback. This works great for questions that have pretty concrete answers. So you would have students try to complete some sort of a task on their sticky note, bring their sticky note up to the front, not write their name on it, and then you would go through and you would try to find some that would be really good to give a little bit of feedback. Maybe the student was close, but there's just a little tweak that you could provide to improve their answer, and you would just give real-time feedback aloud in that time. The next one, number 14, is stand up and discuss. You would have a series of questions displayed on the board. Students are standing up and then finding 2 to 3 people to discuss with and answering those questions. A fill-in-the-blank response is just a really quick questioning strategy where you give students a question that you are pretty confident all of them know the answer to, or most of them know the answer to, and then you invite them to respond together as a class to fill in the blank to a question or a statement. The how do you know is you give the question, you give the answer, and then you ask, how do you know? Or why do you think this is true? 2 options with movement. You ask a question, you provide 2 options for the answer, and then you give a coordinating movement to match each response. Like it could be jumping jacks, raising your hands up and down, placing your hands on your knees. And students do the movement that coordinates to the answer that they would choose. The next questioning strategy is everyone raise their hand. So this is when you would ask a question that would have many possible answers, and then you just say, everyone raise their hand. And students are expected to keep their hand raised until they are either called on and respond, or someone else shares the same answer that they were thinking in their head. The next one is the think about it. This questioning strategy sounds almost too simple, but you ask the question, you ask students to think about it, and then after giving proper wait time, you say, thanks for doing that thinking, and you move on. The last questioning strategy is partner dictation, And it works really good with like mini whiteboards, but can also work great with just a piece of paper and a pencil. You would have questions displayed to students. They're partnered up with a partner A and a partner B. Say partner A answers the first question, partner B is listening, and they are writing down partner A's thinking or answer without providing them any feedback. Then students would switch the role and try it again. This really focuses on students having to listen to one another, having to look at what their thinking looks like written down. Sometimes that's hard for students to write their thinking down, so a lot of great collaboration with this strategy. I also just want to show you that if you go down to the bottom of this blog post and you click on one of these down here, you can download the resources that you can take this right into action. So this is a template where each slide is a template that you can copy and paste into your own lessons, and you can insert your questions right in. So that it's just a great way to be able to plan to use these different questioning strategies in your own lessons. Also, if you are interested in bringing this to a team of teachers or even school-wide, you can use this one with questions that are relatable to teachers to show what it would be like as a student to experience these different questioning strategies. And I think when teachers experience things from a student perspective, they're a lot more likely to internalize it and think, oh yeah, I could totally use that when I ask questions like this in my content area. So that's a great tool as well. The questioning strategies quick reference table just simply takes the questioning strategies that I just went over and gives a quick explanation of each. And then the questioning strategies peer observation form, if this would be something that you did take to a teaching team or school-wide, this strategies questioning strategies peer observation form is just a great tool if you are able to do some peer observation where you can focus in on the questioning strategies that a teacher is asking throughout a class period. You can jot them down, you can jot down the question prompts used, you can write down anything else that you noticed, like it could be, are the routines in place for using this strategy? How long did it take? Were students engaged? Things like that. And then on the back of it, it just has a quick reference of what are those 20 questioning strategies once again. So those are all tools that are included if you choose to download the free resources that go with this blog post. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please let me know if you have any questions.